The greatest tournament in the world has wrapped up. And our friend J.J. Devaney from the Caught Offside Soccer Pod has joined us throughout the World Cup and is here to recap. And my friend, I'm dealing with the hangover.
Yeah, is it a hangover, though? Or is it like that friend you have who dated this super beautiful girl for a long time? Or not even a long time. We'll say a short time. And it didn't work out. They break up. But he won't stop talking about her. So
Right.
we're in that phase. So as if to continue talking about her means that he's still dating her in some kind of weird way. Or he's hanging on to the memory.
Yeah.
That's the period we're in now with the World Cup.
Definitely.
Where I'm doing things like this with you.
Yes. We can't let it go.
No, tomorrow on our podcast on ESPN, we're going to do a retrospective.
48 hours later.
Yeah, but it's because if we keep talking about it, it's not over.
That's right.
And we're not back at school, and it's not the day after Christmas holidays are over.
That's exactly the best way to put it. The championship game, the title match, the final on Sunday goes to France 4-2. And I think the most controversial moment of it was the handball called on Croatia, which led to a PK. The Croatian team, specifically the coach, thought it was the wrong call, outwardly spoke about that, criticized the officials. After the match, they had to go to VAR to see if it was the right call. What'd you think? Did they get that right?
I don't know. I think so.
Do you want to believe?
You see, here's the thing. I think I'd become emotionally invested in Croatia.
I had too.
Yeah. And also, I've been a little bit disheartened by the way the French have played in the tournament in general, which I'm sure we'll get to. And so, a part of me was outraged that this call was made. But when you look at it again, now the referee wasn't 100% sure. He looked at the sideline TV screen and ran off and then ran back, which did not inspire Croatian fans with confidence, I'm sure. So I think he may have changed his decision between that little shuttle run that he did. But look, it was... I mean, the rule is vague enough and is, I suppose not vague, but difficult enough to interpret that it can go either way. I've seen them given. This is the classic soccer analyst answer. I've seen them given. I've seen them not given. For me, the dive by Griezmann on where he completely mugs Brozovic for the free kick for the opening goal. That was just typical France. France hadn't been in the Croatian half for 16 minutes. And that's how they scored their first goal, an own goal off Mandzukic. That was typical France. It will leave a kind of a sour taste in the mouth because that VAR decision means it's not 1-1 at halftime.
Yes.
And you feel Croatia are really in this. When France go 2-1 up, you just got that feeling Croatia aren't going to have enough in the tank to come back. At 1-1, it's a different game.
I also hated it because it was the final. I just feel like when you get that far, whether it's the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, the World Series, you just don't want the officials to decide anything.
Right.
And that's what I hated about it, that it was the final and it felt like the official and the VAR that decided the match.
Right, and it's the clear and obvious part of using VAR. Was that a clear and obvious deliberate handball in the box that necessitated a penalty? I don't think so. I think you have to be 100% sure. Years gone by, the referee just waves that on and we get on with our lives.
Exactly.
And that was one moment. And I haven't hated VAR at this tournament, that I've said before on the show, but that was one moment where I'm like, I wish this was a couple of tournaments ago and we can get on with it.
Well, so let's talk about that as J.J. Devaney joins us here in studio. Did VAR work in this World Cup?
I saw times, again, it's the application, and it's not so much VAR. I think what fans need to accept is that there's not a robot deciding this who's going to get it 100% right. It's still a room full of referees. It's still a guy who's going to take their advice or not and go to the sideline and see something slowed down. So it's imperfect. But for the most part, I felt it worked. Like, for example, the Ronaldo penalty against Iran in the final group game. Like, Ronaldo's hacked down. And we always say one thing VAR will do is it will give justice to the players we want to see succeed. You know, we're not going to see these egregious errors where these top players are going to come out the loser in it. And he gets hacked. The referee says no, but he gets a voice in his ear and he checks it and he gives a penalty. That was right. Then you have the other scenario where the Croatian centre forward, or the Serbian centre forward, Mitrovic, in a vital game as it turned out, is manhandled by two defenders in the box as the ball comes in. I mean, it was so obvious.
Yeah.
Nothing. Not a word in the referee's ear. So again, it's not so much the technology, it's the application of it.
So France, you didn't love how they played throughout the tournament, and Croatia became this dark horse darling. We never see the X Factor team, the dark horse team, win the World Cup. It's always the favorites. It's always the giant countries. It's always, right? The Germanys, the Italys, the Brazils.
Right.
France had won it in 98.
Okay.
But we just don't have dark horses coming out of nowhere to win it.
Yes, but I think if you look at what happened in 2016, that informed how Didier Deschamps, the French manager, viewed this tournament. They were not much, but a little bit more open in 2016. They went to a final and a dark horse. Ronaldo-less for most of the final, bested them 1-0. And they weren't going to let that happen again. Croatia were a dark horse, certainly, but we've seen in tournaments before, again, a Portugal example, 2004 in the European Championships. Portugal were probably the best team in the world at that time. They had a young Ronaldo. They had this plethora of golden generation talent, and they lost to Greece, DA.
But I'm talking about the World Cup specifically.
But it's still tournament football, and that, look, Croatia could have won that game. I think what really went against them was the second half where they're 2-1 down and they needed legs. They needed to stay in it, and France had the legs in Kylian Mbappe. There was one moment in the second half where Pogba plays this beautiful ball on the break, on the counter, to release pressure. And it's a tired Vida chasing back against a fresh Mbappe. Let's not forget Croatia played an entire game more than France did in the run-up with the 3 periods of extra time that they had to play in their games. I know what you're saying about dark horses. Generally, that's the case.
I guess I was going to that point. Did you feel like Croatia just ended up losing steam, losing gas in that final because it had taken so much out of them just to get to the final?
Yeah, and let's look at it. If we'd had a scenario where it's the handball on Perisic doesn't happen, let's imagine that, and it's 1-1, and Croatia are on the attack as they were early in that second half, and the Rebic chance that's saved by Lloris, say that flies into the top corner. How fun would it have been to see a French side chasing it?
Incredible.
But because Croatia had to chase it,
yes,
that took more out of them. And then all of a sudden, you've got this French team, which is built to play on the break, stretching them, pulling them apart, and the legs are gone. And don't forget, 2 of their best players, they're 30 years of age, 30 plus in Modric's case, and Rakitic. You're asking them to do an awful lot for a 4th time in this tournament. And they just couldn't do it. The tank was empty.
JJ Devaney joins us here in studio. I was kind of taken aback at the interest in the World Cup despite the U.S. not being in it because we hadn't had this as a test balloon yet.
That surprises me.
You were surprised that I was surprised?
I was surprised that you were taken aback.
Because we had not had the U.S. not in the World Cup since prior to 1990, which is basically the dark ages of soccer. So there was no comparison that we had of, 8 years ago this happened. This was the first time in modern history the U.S. had not made it. And I just said, boy, does that mean it's going to be a tree that falls in the forest and nobody knows? And not only did soccer fans watch, I knew soccer fans would watch, but there was a lot of non-soccer fans that still were totally into the tournament, even without the U.S. And that, to me, said everything about soccer in America, soccer on television, soccer how it's covered, soccer how it's seen.
Soccer on Big Boy Fox as well, don't forget. That's
right. You're saying you're not surprised that people were super into this even without the U.S.?
Not surprised at all. First of all, let's take the soccer fan before we get to the non-soccer fan. The non-soccer fan spends most of his life not watching the U.S. They watch the Premier.
That's true.
They watch the Premier League, where there is a very few U.S. players, if any, right now. They watch the Bundesliga, where they've got Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, but they're watching it anyway, and traditionally have for years. So the idea that they'd had to have this American angle, yeah, look, to get together for the watch parties for those 3 special games or 4, yeah, of course it hit them. It's right to think it could have had an impact. The non-soccer fan, the very nature of the tournament, which is why France are this weird winner. But the nature of the tournament was exciting. The games were good, DA.
They were great.
If you're
not just good.
They were great. If you're an NFL fan or you're a hockey fan who likes action, who likes good games, or a basketball fan where the scoring is so regular, those games were fabulous. Belgium and Japan. How can a neutral not enjoy the back and forth of that?
And you had big brands like Mexico and England making runs, and that was an easy storyline, I think, for people to kind of latch onto. I mean, I had a lot of non-soccer fans being like, oh, England's playing? I got to watch England.
Do you know how many Americans, particularly from the Sweden game on, after the Colombia penalty kicks, from the Sweden game on, how many Americans who don't have any direct ties to England went full Benedict Arnold?
I know.
And wore jerseys.
I know.
Yeah. Wore even their, if they didn't have an England jersey, wore their club, their EPL club team jersey to the bar to watch the games.
I know. I thought that was a little weird.
A little strange.
A little weird. I know you've got a love-hate relationship being Irish with England.
Well, but it's like, a close foe. It's like Yankee fans and Boston fans. You love them, but it's a weird kind of love.
But
you need them, but you hate them.
But you would never root, if you were a Yankee fan, you would never root for the Red Sox.
No, you wouldn't, but imagine life without them. Imagine life without them. Sports rivalries are all about that. And that's what people say, well, isn't that negative? Isn't it a little bit, almost xenophobic? You don't like the English, blah, blah. The whole idea of nations coming together to play in a World Cup is national rivalries. That's the whole point of it. Otherwise, let's just get the 26 players from each qualification company, bring them to a neutral venue, and pick teams.
Yeah, yeah. I was a little startled by how many people went all in on England, but
Yeah.
I think Fox has got to be thrilled with what ended up happening, and I think it ends up being a bit of the perfect storm for U.S. soccer. I think it was a devastating, emotional loss that we didn't make it. But it helped restart what we needed to do as a country to get to the level where you've got a much better national team program than we have or we had, because now these conversations are happening within the framework of the World Cup for the last 6 months. And we hadn't had those conversations before on a broad scale.
And right at the start of the World Cup, the announcement that we will host the majority of games for the 2026 World Cup kind of refocused the mind a little bit. And especially in the light of Russia having such a great tournament. That was just a stunningly good tournament and enjoyable to watch, that it kind of built in excitement. Once we get over the Winter World Cup, it's going to be our turn next.
Yeah, the Winter World Cup's going to be weird.
Yeah, it's going to be strange. I still don't know how that will work.
In Qatar. Are you saying Qatar or Qatar?
Qatar.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
Getting some brushback on that.
Until someone tells me otherwise, I'll keep saying